Yeah, good morning. Welcome to OTBAM. Dave McIntyre on the hot seat this morning. Thanks for making us a part of your early Thursday morning. If you're watching us on Periscope, Twitter, Facebook or our YouTube channel, or indeed if you're listening to our audio stream, it's great to have you alongside us. Joined this morning by Alan Quinlan. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Dave. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm very good. You're making your co-presenting debut. Is it your co-presenting debut?
No, it's not my debut. Excuse me.
It's with me, anyway. You're co-presenting debut with me.
Yeah.
So it's like learning the ropes all over again.
All over again, yeah, exactly.
It was a very interesting evening, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Tottenham knocked out. Surprisingly, after what they did in Turin a couple of weeks ago, you think it's all set up, 2 away goals, and Juventus just shocked them in the second half and shut up shop then. So the question marks again about Spurs and going to that next level. You know, that's what kind of jumped out last night. Are they ready for that next level yet? It was a game Juventus are a very good side, and I was listening to some of the pundits last night. Will they win the league, the Champions League, Juventus?
You wouldn't feel they will, but
yeah, they're still strong, robust.
Yeah, they're a very difficult team to beat. They're probably one of the best teams in the competition. But we're going to be speaking to Nick Miller, who's a freelance writer with ESPN and The Guardian, about that game at Wembley Stadium last night. We'll have a brief mention as well of Man City's 15-month unbeaten run at home, ended by the mighty Basel last night, albeit in a tie. They were very much guaranteed to go through anyway. We'll also be getting the latest from the court trial up in Belfast as well from our court reporter Frank Graney, and we'll be going through a lot of the rugby ahead of the weekend, of course, because it's a massive weekend. Ireland-Scotland on Saturday as we look to take yet another step towards the Grand Slam. Myself and Quinlan will be chatting about that. We'll be hearing from Gavin Hastings as well, Scottish fullback legend, who has been chatting with Nathan, and all the other day's sports news, and have another look ahead at the weekend as well. On the Spurs Champions League situation, and we'll go into more detail with it with Nick Miller, but it seemed that Mauricio Pochettino was bristling at the suggestion last night that it was due to a lack of experience that his team went out last night, where when I was watching it, I actually felt that's exactly what it was, because they had everything else. They had the chances, they had real dominant periods in both legs, they probably had the better of it over the course of the 2 legs, and yet they've gone out. And in the last 20 minutes, when you saw what Chiellini was capable of, Barzagli in his mid-30s just about able to survive at that level, Buffon with a couple of big saves, and then the little sprinkle of class from Dybala and Higuain and Pjanic, I just thought it was Juventus just waited for their moment and they took it.
What experience does for you is it gives you belief and confidence, and when they scored that first goal from Higuain, they panicked. They looked a bit panicky, didn't they? They didn't look as fluid and as controlled.
Although in saying that, they went 2-0 down in 9 minutes in Turin, and there was no panic.
But it's different.
They could easily have imploded then.
But it's a little bit different away from home, because if you don't react and do something quickly, the game is completely gone from you. So sometimes when your back is to the wall, it's easier to come out fighting. They got the 2 goals and suddenly they've all the momentum in Turin.
Plus I guess they had the whole tie ahead of them, didn't they, as well?
Yeah.
So there was no need to panic, whereas when that goal goes in, I think there was 2 minutes 40 seconds between the 2 goals.
And I know myself from playing at home, maybe in Thomond Park with Munster over the years, when we, that home advantage, and you feel the expectation to get a result. If the opposition score a try, you're like, it is a little bit of a hammer blow to you. So I can understand his frustration at the experienced question that was thrown at him last night after the game, Pochettino, but it does make a little bit of a difference. And they seemed to... It doesn't happen as a group, everyone is panicking everywhere, but if there's a little bit of self-doubt in 3 individuals, does that stop them running as hard? Does that stop them taking a chance? And it does have an effect, and that's what goals do. And then the opposition... So what did Juventus do when Higuain scored? They went for it, they went after it, and Dybala's goal was sensational. I'm not sure what Trippier was doing with being so far, bringing him on side so far, but a little bit of a hammer blow. But to be honest, I can understand his frustration as well, because a small little bit of luck and that game won last night, so you switch off at that level. And that's
they did ride their luck as well, didn't they?
A little bit, they did.
Got away with a Stonewall penalty against them with that Vertonghen challenge. And there was a lot of hand-wringing about the header that struck the post from Harry Kane, but had that gone in, Juventus would have been furious. He was clearly offside, a good yard offside. And plus, they gave, 2 penalties away in the first leg, one of which hit the bar. So they did ride their luck.
Yeah, they did a little bit.
Times over the 2 legs. But I guess you're going to do that if you're Tottenham and you're going to beat Juventus.
Absolutely. And look, they could be in the next round. They could be in the quarterfinals very easy, you know. So
they just will be devastated.
Tiny little bit.
They should have got this done.
Tiny little bit away. And it's a massive thing for them now in attracting players and saying, are we at the next level? You know, when you look at Liverpool going through to the quarterfinals and their defensive frailties, and they'll be really, really frustrated that they're not there.
It's a real opportunity lost. We're going to chat to Nick Miller, as I said, later on in the show. We have a little bit of video to bring you here because you were mentioning Thomond Park there, what it's like to play there. Well, Keith Wood knows what it's like to play in Thomond Park, as does his son, Alex Wood, who came up with an absolutely blistering try as Munchins won the Junior Cup at Thomond Park yesterday. Have a look at this try. It's spectacular. So there's a little break, just like his dad might have done, sprinting through the middle, almost a Jordan Larmour type sidestep off his right foot, then off his left foot, and in under the post. And that was score crucial in winning the game.
Honest. And he's not built like his dad.
No, well look, let's have a look at his dad. This is his dad in full fly. Let's spot the comparisons. So Keith Wood look at that step off his left foot under the post as well. It's like watching the same footage, just one a little grainier than the other.
But Alex is much taller. His dad was kind of a little bit roundy.
A bit sleeker.
Woody Senior won't mind me saying that, but he'd unbelievable footwork, Woody Senior. But this is a great score, and I think it's after that last swerve, it's the ability to put on the afterburners there and score. And my cousin is actually involved in coaching that team. He's a teacher in Munchins as well. So I think that was the first time in 20 years they won the Junior Cup.
And they produced that image afterwards, which is obviously a tribute to Axel Foley.
It was fantastic to Axel because Munchins meant so much to him, and that was a lovely moment after the game where they honoured him and didn't forget him. I think it's fantastic. Listen, I have a small fella myself. You've kids. When your child does anything, even in an under-8s game on a Saturday morning, you're kind of proud. But to do it on a scene like that, so the speculation will be who's going to sign Alex Wood next. Look,
if your child manages to put his trousers on successfully in the morning, you're happy. You're gushing with pride. Yeah. So I can only imagine how Keith was absolutely bursting with pride as he was watching from the stands at Thomond Park yesterday. That was one major game taking place in the rugby sphere this week. There's another one on Saturday at the Aviva Stadium, and there's no tickets for this game, not surprisingly, apart from these two. Hang on. Apart from these two. So we have got 2 tickets to the game here for our OTBAM viewers/listeners. So what we want you to do, all you have to do to get in with a shout of taking these to the Aviva on Saturday afternoon is to just share the show or retweet the show on whatever social media medium you're using this morning, and leave a comment as well. So share the show or retweet the show, leave us a comment, and you'll have a chance of grabbing those 2 tickets and heading along to the Aviva Stadium Saturday afternoon for what we hope will be step 4 of 5 en route to our second Grand Slam in a decade. So get in touch with us on those channels. We're going to talk papers now.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband. OTB.
Okay, the back pages this morning dominated by Juventus Tottenham. No surprise there. The headline in the Irish Times: Juve stunning second half comeback sinks Tottenham. Myself and Alan have mentioned it slightly. I'll give you a little bit of a view of that. Mention it slightly as well. And Joe Schmidt, 3 changes we believe. It's in a lot of the papers, both online and the print pages this morning as well, that the 3 changes are going to be Tyke Furlong and Ian Henderson, as we expected, coming back into the Ireland pack, and 1 in the back line as well. Gary Ringrose is going to be replacing Chris Farrell in midfield for his first game in several weeks. He has very little rugby under his belt, but at least we know that he's capable of performing at that level. Next of all, we're going to go to the Irish Examiner. A lady luck is the headline, and it's again referring to Juventus' brilliant comeback against Tottenham at Wembley. Juventus' comeback ends Tottenham's European dream at Wembley. There's a very interesting piece as well with Sarah Carey on juggling motherhood with intercounty camogie. Total dedication is the headline there. And inside the Independent Sports, or the Examiner Sports Supplement, a piece with Tommy Martin, who's taking a little bit of satisfaction from the manner in which PSG, dominated by their Qatari money, were dominated by Real Madrid in the Champions League in Paris on Tuesday night. Really disappointing performance from them. Moving on to the Herald Sport. Horrible, bitter loss, says James McCarthy. Now, he's referring to the league final defeat to Kerry last year and how that spurred them onto winning the Sam Maguire in the 3 in a row. Now, we remember the piece that Paul Kimmage wrote about Jim Gavin, having compared Stephen Rochford and Mayo's devastation after losing by a point to Dublin in the All-Ireland final to how they felt a few months prior to that, watching Kerry walk up the steps of the Hogan lift.
It's not the same, surely.
Like, it's just in no way is remotely the same. And I know Paul Kimmage took umbrage to that. Look, Jim Gavin will say these things and you would hope that he means them, but I can't imagine James McCarthy was absolutely... Were they devastated? I wonder
they were really disappointed. When you set that ruthless standard, for sure, you're disappointed.
And it's a national title, and it's another medal. But I'd imagine they got over it pretty quickly. Yeah, knowing that they were still the best team in the country, that they probably weren't at their best, and there was plenty of room for improvement. And then lo and behold, a few months later, they have climbed those steps and they've lifted yet another Sam Maguire. They're 5 and 7 years.
You never shut up about it.
Well, look... Someday Tip will win their All-Ireland football title. You have enough hurling All-Ireland titles in the bank as well. Arrivederci. It was inevitable we were going to get a headline similar to that. Kane's pain as Spurs crash out. And at the top there you can see Basil Fawlty. So it's another reference just to the fact that Basel beat Man City last night. It was a very strong City team as well. And a number of changes from the side that beat Chelsea at the weekend. And then just the top of the left there, Ruby, I'm all good. You're looking forward to seeing Ruby back in the saddle.
Yeah, big time,
He's going to be in Thurles today.
Thurles today, maybe one more at the weekend, and then Cheltenham next week. So it's like a guy coming back from in the rugby scene, been out for 15 weeks and play a friendly today, friendly at the weekend, and then straight into
it kind of has parallels
Cup next week or
with
Six
Gary
Nations.
Ringrose. We knew that he was going to be coming back into the squad and into contention fitness-wise this weekend, but we would have thought he would have played last weekend for Leinster. But then Chris Farrell goes down, and there's no chance they're going to risk Gary Ringrose because they can't afford to lose another guy in that position. You're trying to balance getting some minutes under your belt with actually being fit enough for the big game. Ruby Walsh is trying to balance making sure he's fit for Cheltenham with just getting a couple of rides under his belt heading into next week.
And that's it. He'll probably have been riding out for the last couple of weeks a little bit more carefully, and he feels he's ready. It's like a player pushing themselves to come back for a big semi-final or a big final towards the end of the season. You got to take a chance, but I'm sure medically he's had so many broken bones and injuries over the years, and he's tough. Jockeys are tough. He's not going to miss Cheltenham next week. Nothing's going to stop him, and he's a machine. When he goes to Cheltenham, his success has been phenomenal there. And I was watching the press stuff he did yesterday. You can see that little glint in the eye, that little bit of excitement. I had Davy Russell on last year with me on the News Talk breakfast, and I was just amazed by the sound of his voice, ready, the anticipation, the excitement, the build-up. And Cheltenham is massive, so it's great for the Irish punters and for racing that Ruby is back, and obviously Willie Mullins will be delighted as well to have him back in the mix for next week. Yeah, and he's got a couple of big calls as well to make, particularly whether he's going to go at Mint or Duvan, but it's a nice place to be, to have that sort of choice in your hands, which Ruby does every year. You've Blown It is the back page on the Irish Daily Star. We've already talked a little bit about Juventus. Tottenham will be going in more detail with Nick Miller in a few minutes' time. But at the top there, you can see Wenger going back to basics. He basically just wants the Arsenal players to remember just how good they are. He was saying, Quinny, when you're in a negative spiral, which is the term that Lauren Koscielny used, it's very easy to forget how good you are. Absolutely. They're not good, though. Yeah, this is not a good Arsenal team. I would not have them as favourites going into this tie against an AC Milan team that isn't in the top 5 in Serie A. You hear the word spineless, character, work rate, honesty, all those words in the last few weeks from the so-called experts who played the game at the highest level. And they're ingredients you cannot be without in any team at any level. Even for kids playing, you need character, you need a bit of desire, a bit of drive. Now, there's serious question marks when you start asking questions about people, their character and their desire. Isn't that almost the evidence as to their lack of spine? Yes. How you react. Because aside from being accused of being a cheat or feigning injury, being told that you've got no bottle and that you've got no mental strength is one of the biggest insults a professional sports person can have hurled at them. It's the biggest insult. And this seems to be routinely thrown in Arsenal's faces and these players, and yet they don't come back fighting. But on paper, they're not good players. Well, that's an argument that I'm trying to have with Kev. 6, 7, 8 players, maybe. I think there are some very good players in that Arsenal team. Yeah, I don't think they're good enough to win a Champions League or a Premier League, but I think they're good enough to be far more productive than they currently are.
There are several players. For example, one of the players who gets an awful lot of flack is Granit Xhaka, and rightly so. He's been appalling this season, and he looks like often he just doesn't really care enough. I actually think he's a really talented midfield player. I think under the right manager, a manager that actually holds him to account and forces him to take...
Is there a problem, and this is really an interesting thing for me, and we had this in maybe over the years in rugby, if you bring in too many overseas guys, what does it mean to them? You look at France, all the overseas guys, when the going gets tough on 60 or 70 minutes,
look at the City team. The City team is laden with foreign players. Manchester United team that won the treble.
But maybe they've just, you see, this is the kind of contrast between signing overseas players is the characters you do sign. So that natural kind of work rate, honesty, desire is in a player or it's not in a player. So have Arsenal,
all of it comes from the manager.
So have Arsenal got it wrong in some of the signings is what I'm trying to say, not just on the quality thing, because I think if I'm signing a rugby player for Munster, for Leinster, I go and find out what the character's like. Is this guy a real hard worker? Okay, you look for the talent as well. And maybe he's too many guys who are very, very talented, but maybe not really, really resilient, physical, strong, have that mentality. And collectively put 3 or 4 of those guys in any group and they can pull people down.
Yeah, well, they are lacking a bit of character, a bit of a strong mentality. I think a lot of it comes from the manager. I think the culture that Wenger has ingrained in that club for the last certainly 5 years.
It's time for a new voice at this stage.
There's no bad rap if you don't perform.
I feel sorry for him though as well because of his legacy.
I've stopped feeling sorry for him because he had an opportunity to get out a couple of times.
You lack a little bit of empathy for you're kind of ruthless yourself.
Many would say that. Last for me on the back pages, it's the back of the Irish Daily Mirror. Seconds out, Spurs cruising to last 8. 169 seconds later, and 2 goals end the Juventus dream. We're down for the count. That's the thoughts of Lauren Koscielny, who apparently is the player that became very emotional in those crisis talks that were held at Arsenal last week. He feels they have a chance if they can just rediscover a little bit of confidence, a bit of form of getting past Gennaro Gattuso's AC Milan side. They kick off at 6 o'clock in the first leg at the San Siro tonight. What have you got?
Well, in the Times Ireland, we've got, and this is a really interesting one, Ireland are a greater test than England. That's Gavin Hastings, which is really interesting, isn't it? He's kind of talking Ireland up, saying that, you know, this is a bigger challenge for Scotland than facing England in Murrayfield, coming to Dublin. You could argue and say, agree with him a little bit.
Well, they're away from home, obviously, so there's that. That's the only aspect of I would have thought. It's easy to say when you've beaten England that Ireland will be a stiffer challenge. But you can see why he's saying it, because Ireland are certainly the team that have all the momentum behind them. They are at home this weekend. Scotland's record in Dublin is not great. So I can see why he's saying that, to be honest, although Scotland hadn't beaten England in 10 years.
Yeah.
They've beaten us, what is it, 3 times in that time?
And all the Scots will talk us up this week, but look, I think we won't get hoodwinked. We understand how good they can be if you allow them play. Tottenham crash out, we spoke about that, 2-goal blitz in 3 second-half minutes and knock Spurs out of the Champions League. Next one is the Irish Indo. Another really interesting story is, and it kind of only, a little bit of speculation the last day or two, but it kind of only broke last night. London Irish look to Kidney. Declan Kidney looks like he's going back into the coaching role.
So he's been out of the game for 5 years now.
2013 since he left the Irish job.
The athletics coordinator, or the head of pretty much in charge, overseeing all athletics departments in UCC since he left the Ireland job in 2013. So it's a long time to be away from the professional game. How much coaching is he actually going to be doing at London Irish? Or how much will he be trusting it to the people he's going to be bringing in? Les Kiss being one of them.
They've obviously struggled in the last number of years.
They're going to get relegated,
Nick Kennedy is their director of rugby. He's still contracted there. They're going to get relegated. And it looks like Declan Kidney is going to bring Les Kiss with him. You remember, and I played under both those guys in 2009, and when Declan Kidney assembled his coaching staff, it was Gert Small, Les Kiss, Alan Gaffney. So he surrounded himself with strong guys. So he likes Les, trusts Les, and it looks like Les Kiss is going to be involved with him. So I'm delighted he's back involved, and this is an ideal job for him. They're lacking that bit of direction. They've probably spent money in the wrong ways. There's a little bit of uncertainty, but they've struggled in the last number of years, and he's a real good man to come in, put in some structure there, and maybe get a bit of guidance and a feel-good factor back in the club as well. So I'm delighted he's back involved.
Can I just say that if I'm a London Irish supporter and I'm waking up to this news this morning, I'm looking at a guy that that left the Ireland job with a lot of the credit that he'd built up through the Grand Slam kind of whittled away over some of the performances between 2011 and 2013, combined with a guy who's just been sacked at Ulster. And I'm wondering, is this the dream team coaching ticket that's going to help us build from the depths that we've fallen to?
It's definitely an argument, yeah. But who did they get? Did they go Southern Hemisphere? Did they start going? What they're getting here is two guys who are very experienced and will be really, really motivated to put their own CVs back up on a pedestal again. Les Kiss, the Ulster thing, there's more going on in Ulster than just Les Kiss's role as director of rugby. I think it goes far deeper than that. The structures, players they've signed over the years, lacking a bit of identity. And I think he went into a tough job there. So I still think he's a lot to offer, Les Kiss, and I worked with him with Ireland. And I definitely think this man has. I think he's lost to the game of rugby. If he's not back, if he didn't get back into coaching, I think it would have been a travesty. And he's 2 Heineken Cups won. I was part of a group that, you know, he brought from nowhere to be European champions. So there's similarities. What London Irish maybe want is to bring that group on, change structures. And he's really good at that stuff. Good at man management. He'll get a feel-good factor there. And so I understand your point. It may be a little bit of risk, but there's a lot of experience there, and 2 guys who will be highly motivated to get themselves back on track.
And 2 guys maybe with something to prove as well.
Yeah, definitely.
If any London Irish fans have their doubts over this potential recruitment policy, give Alan Quinlan a ring and set it straight. He's won me over here.
Great picture of Alex Wood there. We spoke about it. And the baldy head of his dad here with a big smiley face. What a moment for him. Alex Wood scoring for St Munchin's there when they won the Junior Cup yesterday. And GA, 3 in battle for top GA job, the Director General. A couple of people interviewed yesterday.
The former president of the GA, Liam O'Neill, and Liam Sheedy,
Tom Ryan
former
as
tip
well.
hurling manager, Tom Ryan as well. So that'll be interesting to see how that one goes.
There's a headline about Ruby. 2 minds over Min or Duvan call next week. You mentioned that.
Yeah, well,
the luxury of having the ability to
a lot of jockeys at Cheltenham next week that would dearly love to be in that position.
They'll take his hand
Thanks
off for any
for that,
of those calls.
Our next, we've got one more paper as well. Guardian.
Yeah, we got the Guardian. Yeah,
always interesting on the back of a Champions League night.
So it's Dybala drives obviously Spurs 2-1. Juventus against Spurs knocked them out. And this is a story that was covered during the week, obviously with the Sir Bradley Wiggins, the Jiffy bag, and that report that came out a couple of days ago. David Brailsford, the head of Team Sky, under pressure. The pressure builds on Team Sky chief to quit after head of World Cycling urges major anti-doping inquiry. That's something that's creating a lot of uncertainty in cycling. Brailsford is coming under huge pressure there to really take action. You know, you remember when he spoke about this clean sport and that they'd have a zero tolerance, and then you have the Bradley Wiggins thing.
That's been shredded, hasn't it? Their all sense of integrity.
A lot of uncertainty there. And Serena's back. Williams set for tennis return after becoming a mother on International Women's Day. Yeah,
her Instagram post this morning has got an awful lot of traction. Thanks a million for that, Quinny. We'll be getting back to the Champions League with Nick Miller of The Guardian in a few minutes' time. Obviously, myself and Alan are going to be chatting on the rugby as well, a massive weekend of the Six Nations Championship. We're also going to hear from Gavin Hastings as well, the Scottish legendary fullback who's been in conversation with Nathan Murphy this week. But for our next piece, some of the details of what we're about to discuss may be a bit distressing for some of our listeners, so we are going to cover the latest in the Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding rape trial. It's due to continue today. The hearing from defence witnesses when the case resumes before the Belfast Crown Court later this morning. Mr Jackson spent just over 3.5 hours in the witness box yesterday. The Ireland and Ulster rugby player denies raping a 19-year-old student at a party in his South Belfast home in June 2016. He's also pleaded not guilty to sexually assaulting her. His teammate Stuart Olding is also accused of raping her, while 2 of their friends are on trial for various offences arising from the same alleged incident. Our courts correspondent Frank Graney joins us now from Belfast, and before we go on again, just a little bit of a warning that yesterday's evidence did contain some details of a graphic and a sexual nature, so some of our viewers may find that upsetting. Frank, can you tell us first up what Paddy Jackson had to say about these allegations yesterday?
Sure. Well, like you mentioned, he spent some time in the witness box yesterday, 3.5 hours between giving his direct evidence and being cross-examined. He went through his background, his rugby career, and before we got into the allegations, he spoke about the schools that he attended and his rise through the ranks with Ireland. He captained various Irish school sides, under 18, under 19s and under 20s. And then he was asked specifically about the allegations, the reason, I suppose, we're all before Belfast Crown Court for the past few weeks. And up until now, we have been hearing the evidence as put forward by the prosecution. This was the defence's first opportunity to put their case forward. We have heard the various police interviews that Paddy Jackson gave following his arrest in June 2016. But from the stand yesterday, he was asked about the night in question. He said that he had just returned from a tour of South Africa with the Ireland team, where he was the first choice number 10. He said he was the happiest man in Belfast when he returned. He dropped his bag home and he immediately went and met his friends that he hadn't seen in some time. He was on a 4-week holiday and he was very excited about that. So he said he went to Blaine McElroy's house. Now, Blaine McElroy is one of the other accused. He's known him since he was in school, and he is facing one charge of exposure. He denies it. He said he went over to his house with his brother. They watched, the Euros were still on at the time. They watched that. They had a few beers. They went to another pub. England were playing in the Euros that evening. They watched that. They went to a nightclub called Ollie's. There were some more drinks had there. He said he had some gin and tonics. He accepted on some CCTV footage that was shown to the court yesterday that showed him leaving Ollie's after he'd finished serving. He accepted that he looked a bit dopey. He said he went back to this party and he was asked how he got back, and he spoke about getting a taxi. We heard that he was there with Stuart Olding, who was also facing one count of rape, and the other two, Blaine McElroy and a man called Rory Harrison, another friend of his from Mansroad in Belfast, who was accused of perverting the course of justice and withholding information, and 4 girls, one of whom is the complainant who has made these allegations. He said he didn't know any of the girls before they went back to this afters party at his house in Oakley Park in South Belfast, not far from the Kingspan Stadium, where he of course plays his rugby with Stuart Olding. He was asked about that taxi journey home, and he was asked if he had used his name and fame to secure somebody else's taxi. And this was in relation to a claim made by the complainant in her evidence a few weeks ago, where she claimed that Paddy Jackson had effectively said to this driver who was booked for another fare outside the nightclub, "I'm Paddy Jackson," and that this driver took his fare. He said he'd never do that, that he'd be embarrassed to do something like that. It's just not his style. He said back at the party then there was some music being played, some drinks were had, there was some dancing, everything was very relaxed. He said he was sitting on the sofa and he noticed the complainant looking at him. He said he smiled at her. He said there was some innocent flirting going on at the party. He said that she was following him around the house, that he would go into the kitchen to prepare some drinks and that she would follow him inside. And he said he was attracted to her, that he did like her back. He got the impression that she liked him and he did like her back. And he said at one point, he doesn't know why, but he said he went upstairs to his bedroom, and he said that he was thinking at the time as he was going upstairs that she might follow him. Indeed she did. He said in the bedroom there was some consensual kissing. He described it as passionate. And then he was asked about a claim that she made in her evidence, whereby she claims that he tried to undo her trousers at this point and that she told him in no uncertain terms that she wasn't willing to take things any further and that she went back downstairs to the party. He said he had no recollection of that happening. He said what he remembers happening is that she pulled away from the kiss at one point and asked him if he knew what her name was. He shrugged it off initially. She asked again. She persisted, and he admitted that he didn't know what her name was and that she began teasing him, so he decided to go back downstairs to the party. He said yesterday that he spent about 10 or 15 minutes down there, that she came down after him, that she came right up close to him, that she started running her fingernails down his arm, and he got the impression that she had forgotten what happened upstairs, or she was willing to forgive him for it. He said he went back upstairs to his room and that she again followed him. He said there was some more consensual kissing. He said they moved onto the bed. He said she was lying on top of him. She was fully dressed. He was too. And he said then at one point she undid his trousers and performed oral sex on him. He said that it was consensual and that she seemed to be enjoying it.
He was also asked, Frank, about the allegation against Stuart Olding, his teammate, and a man that Paddy Jackson has described as a very close friend. Can you tell us what he had to say about that?
Sure. Well, the specific allegation against Stuart Olding is that he's accused of forcing this woman to perform oral sex on him. We did hear last week from his own defence barrister that he was initially charged with vaginal sex, but that charge was dropped before Christmas. So that's the specific allegation, the charge that he's facing, and the charge that he obviously denies. And Paddy Jackson was asked about that, and he said yes, that he remembered Stuart Olding coming into the room at one point, and this was while she was allegedly performing this consensual sex act on him. And he said that he was a bit embarrassed when Stuart walked in, but that he just kind of waved at him and smiled as if to say, hey, look what's happening here. And he did accept that that was a stupid thing to do. But he said that Stewart walked in and that when he came over to the bed, he said that the woman's attentions then turned to him and that she started performing oral sex on Stewart. Paddy said that he was at the end of the bed at this point and that he took his trousers off. He had said in his police interviews that the woman didn't seem in any way distressed when this was going on. And again, he was asked under cross-examination, was he hacked off that his mate had come in and effectively taken over? And he said, no, not at all. He said that the woman didn't seem in any way distressed and again seemed to be enjoying what was going on.
A key part of the trial is surrounded the girl who walked in at one point. Was he asked about her claims yesterday?
He was, Dave, yes. This is a woman by the name of Dara Florence, and she was one of the other 3 girls who went back to the party that night. And again, Paddy Jackson said that he didn't know her before that night. And in her evidence, it's worth just reminding your viewers that in her evidence, she said that she was looking for a friend of hers and that she went upstairs, heard some moaning as she was going upstairs. She didn't feel it was like a sexual moan. It didn't sound like somebody was in distress. That she walked into the room and she turned around to her friend who was waiting outside the bedroom and said that she had just witnessed a threesome. She told police that she didn't think that the woman seemed in any way distressed and that she didn't think that she had just witnessed a rape. Now, Paddy Jackson was asked yesterday about this woman walking into the room, and he said he did remember it. And he was asked if he remembered saying anything to her, and he said he remembered a conversation, a brief conversation, but he didn't remember the exact content of it. Now, both the complainant and this witness, Dara Florence, said that when she walked in, Paddy Jackson effectively asked her if she wanted to stay and if she wanted to join in, and she said no, turned on her heels and left the room. She was only in there for a couple of moments. Paddy Jackson was also asked yesterday about something that she said to police. She told police that when she walked into the bedroom, she was 100% certain that Paddy Jackson was having sex with the woman while her head was down towards the middle part of Stuart Olding's body. Paddy Jackson was asked about that yesterday. He said she's wrong, she's mistaken, and he said that when that was put to her while he was being interviewed by police following his arrest in June of 2016, he said he was shocked and he couldn't understand why she had said that. Okay, has the other side been given an opportunity to cross-examine Paddy Jackson yet? Yes, Toby Hedworth, the prosecuting barrister, did spend a brief time cross-examining him yesterday afternoon. He asked him a few questions and he effectively put the prosecution's case to him. So Paddy Jackson has, throughout these proceedings and throughout the number of police interviews that he gave, he insists that he did not have sex with this woman and that the sexual act that she performed on him was consensual. The prosecution claims that he did have sex with her and that it was against her will and that he knew or was reckless as to whether or not she was consenting to that particular act. He put it to him on a number of occasions that he did have sex with her. Paddy Jackson repeatedly said no. And he was also asked about some text exchanges between 2 of the other accused, Blaine McElroy and Rory Harrison, who in the hours after this alleged incident took place at Jackson's home, exchanged some text messages. Rory Harrison had brought her home in a taxi and he had said that she was in hysterics. This is in the conversation with Blaine McElroy, and he said that it wasn't going to end well. Now, the 4 boys met for lunch later that afternoon at a restaurant in Belfast, and Toby Hedworth asked, was that discussed? The fact that the boys had been talking about this, that Rory Harrison had brought the complainant home and was speaking about the distress that she was in during that taxi journey home. Paddy Jackson said no, that it wasn't discussed during that lunch. And Toby Hedworth said he found that fairly incredible and he didn't believe that something like that wouldn't be discussed over lunch, given the fact that it had only happened a short time beforehand. And then finally, before he finished up his cross-examination of Mr. Jackson, he put it to him that what happened that night was he simply pushed and pushed this woman beyond what she was prepared to do that night. Paddy Jackson insisted that didn't happen. Okay, Frank, I understand the trial also heard from a friend of Paddy Jackson who gave the jury an insight into his character. Yes, this was a woman by the name of Dr. Katie Donaldson. She is a doctor now working in Scotland, but she described herself, like you mentioned, as a close friend of Paddy Jackson. She first got to know him through her brother. Her younger brother was in the same class as Paddy Jackson in his grammar school, and they were very close. He said the family, both their families are very tight, and she was asked, I suppose, to give the court an insight into the type of man Paddy Jackson is. She described him as caring, considerate, calm, polite. She said he's the kind of person that enjoys making people laugh, and she described him as a good guy. Finally, Frank, he's now finished giving evidence. He's finished being on the stand. So do we know if any of the others are going to give evidence? Not for certain, not at this point. So in any criminal trial, an accused person isn't obliged to take the stand. Paddy Jackson didn't have to give evidence yesterday. He chose to, for whatever reason. We'll never know. But the other three now, it's up to them and their legal teams to consult and decide whether or not they're going to give evidence. There are also, I mentioned that Dr. Katie Donaldson, she was a character witness called yesterday. There are also a number of other character witnesses that the jury were told they may hear from, including, of course, the Ireland and Ulster captain, Rory Best. So we'll find out over the course of the next few days whether Mr. Best is going to give evidence and whether indeed the three remaining accused, Stuart Olding, Blaine McElroy and Rory Harrison, are going to take the stand as well.
OK, Frank, thanks very much for that this morning. That's Frank Rennie, our courts correspondent, live from Belfast ahead of today's proceedings in the Paddy Jackson and Stuart Olding rape trial. We're going to move back to matters on the pitch now this morning. We're going to talk about the Champions League, and last night Tottenham going out to Juventus in the second round, second leg at Wembley Stadium. Nick Miller, ESPN writer and Guardian freelance writer, will be with us very shortly. But first, here's Philippe Auclair on something that happened the previous night, PSG going out to Real Madrid, talking about the impact of PSG's loss and what it might have on their future finances. He was on Off the Ball last night, especially around the Kylian Mbappe deal.
You know, this will have an impact on PSG this summer because of financial fair play, this. Getting out of the competition that early. It's a big, big loss for them, financially speaking. I'm pretty sure they hadn't bet on getting out in the round of 16.
Will that affect that Mbappe deal then?
No, it won't, because it's a clause. Do you remember the fantastic clause that Mbappe was a loan that was turned into a purchase?
Yeah.
Should one clause be respected? And the clause was, should PSG not be relegated?
Oh, right.
So
listen, it happened with Racing before in the 80s when they signed Francescoli and all that. So
yeah, you know, it's not going to happen mathematically. I think they're safe.
Yeah, I think there's a very good chance PSG won't be relegated from Liga anytime soon. I was in Paris on Tuesday night, so disappointed with the PSG performance. Myself and Kevin had almost convinced ourselves we were about to witness a potential classic, and it just never got going. They were just so poor.
Yeah, it was being billed as that one, wasn't it? And you felt maybe beforehand that this was a massive opportunity for PSG to turn over Real Madrid, who've been up and down this season, to say the least. But again, we mentioned experience with Juve. Madrid could have been 6-7. They could have won by 6 or 7. They were fantastic.
They were really brilliant.
They were brilliant. And control, patience. Ronaldo again, you know, he just keeps, and people often ask me who's my favourite sports person, and I always pick Ronaldo, even though he played for United, and I hate United, and you're a United fan.
Oh yeah, cheers Quinny.
But he just keeps turning up, even at the age he's at. All the money he has, keeps turning up, and perfect example of that desire, that willingness to win, put your body on the line, and it makes a difference in these big games. We're speaking about it with Arsenal. See what the reaction be when they go to AC Milan tonight. But I just thought Madrid were brilliant the other night. They haven't gone away, and they're still potential winners after that performance, I think. But you got to say, all the money PSG have spent. Neymar was a loss to him, and you want to see him. You know, he's an exciting player to watch. And you're talking about maybe the whole game getting going and all that. Someone like him, obviously, he can make things happen, but they were really, really poor, PSG.
Well, the Neymar was very average in the first leg, so how much of a difference he have made, we will never know. Nick Miller joins us on the line. Good morning, Nick. How are you?
Morning, lads. How you doing?
2 minutes and 49 seconds of chaos at Wembley Stadium, and Tottenham are out of the Champions League. Does that just about sum it up?
Pretty much. I mean, you know, when the chaos is Juventus attacking you, then I suppose you can't be massively disappointed. But it was incredible how, over the 180 minutes, Spurs dominated for probably 165 of them, and that was enough for them to go out. It was a pretty incredible performance by Juventus. It's sort of a lesson in ruthlessness, really.
Yeah, we've been talking about that ruthlessness and the stuff of champions and the steel that's required when things are really tough for you, as they were for Juventus. And Mauricio Pochettino was bristling at the suggestion that it was down to a lack of experience that ultimately was the reason for his side going out. But watching it, it kind of felt that was the case. So Juventus, as you say, dominated for 75%, 80% of this tie, and yet when they needed to come up with the big moment, they were able to do it.
I mean, I suppose this shouldn't necessarily surprise us, because this is sort of what Juventus do. They find ways to win. They have players who, like, Higuain and Dybala, who scored last night, who can look sort of peripheral for long portions of the game, and then just find some way to hurt you. That is something that Spurs are going to have to learn, and probably learn pretty quickly with the team that they have at the moment.
So the start that Tottenham made to the game, it looked like Son was having Barzagli on toast pretty much for the majority of the game. They created one or two really good chances. Do you think that half-time just came at the wrong time for them, because it just gave Juventus an opportunity to steady themselves? Because at the back they didn't look great, Juventus. They had a couple of really good chances, Tottenham, and over the course of the two legs they'll certainly feel they had enough chances to win the tie.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was necessarily half-time, because Spurs were still pretty good in the sort of 10 minutes or so afterwards. You just see my cat on the sofa behind me there as well. But I think it was Max Allegri made a tactical switch about sort of 10 minutes, 15 minutes into the second half, where he moved Andrea Barzagli infield a bit where Son couldn't quite get him so much, and they, not to get sort of bogged down into too much of this, but they switched to 4-3-3 and it worked instantly. And that 5 minutes they scored those 2 goals, and that was it. The
performance of Dybala, he kind of flitted in and out of that game last night, but when he really was needed, he was able to come up with that just sumptuous finish. And I know there was a defensive lapse in particular from Kieran Trippier, who just managed to play him on side. But when you see what he's been able to do over the last couple of seasons in these key moments against the best teams in Europe, I'm starting to increasingly believe that it's unlikely he's going to be at Juventus for the long term. As big a club as they are, there are riches far beyond what he can learn in Turin available elsewhere in Europe. I wonder what your thoughts are on where he ranks now amongst the, say, top 5 or 6 players in Europe, and what are the chances that he's going to end up at a super club, be it Real, Barca, PSG, Bayern Munich, over the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the thing that people say about him is that he's the kind of the successor to Messi. I think that's probably got more to do with his sort of stature and his the fact that he's Argentinian as well. But undoubtedly, he's such a brilliant player, and you kind of forget that last night we were seeing him not 100% fit. He's only just come back from a while out, so to see him looking that threatening and to sort of cut through, I suppose, defence, which is usually pretty good, that easily was absolutely remarkable.
I want to finish on Tottenham, but before we leave Juventus, we're wondering how good they are. They're maybe slightly less off in terms of their form and their ability, and they're all a year older, some of the guys like Barzagli and Buffon and Chiellini, than the side that has lost 2 of the last 3 Champions League finals. But now that we've seen all the top teams play in the knockout stages, where do you rank them as potential winners? Would you still have them behind all those clubs I mentioned previously, and then maybe the likes of Manchester City as well?
Yeah, probably, but I don't want to kind of fall back on cliches, but they were just one of those, as we saw last night, they're just one of those teams who know what it takes to win. They can be sort of quite bad for long spells of games and then just do something to beat you. I mean, at half time we were kind of discussing in the press box that this may even be a Juventus team that were past their best, and that Tottenham's intensity and so on were too much for them. But they still never, despite them being kind of pressed and looking overrun at some stage, they still never really looked out of control. So you wouldn't really bet against them in any game against any team.
So on Tottenham, a lot of the commentary in the papers this morning is around how the experience will stand to them and they will come back next year a better team. They're almost certainly going to qualify for the Champions League again next season, and that their key players will have a little more nous when it comes to those big moments, and they won't panic if they find themselves in a similar situation next season. But that's on the assumption that all those guys are still there, Nick. Now, this is another year that'll have come and gone where they won't have won a big trophy if they don't manage to win the FA Cup. It'll be 10 years without a trophy. There's only so much time that Kane, Eriksen, Dembele, that they're going to hang around and stick with a club that isn't winning things. And of course, they have to assume their manager's going to stick around as well.
Well, I mean, I think the manager's the key point. You've got to be quite careful here, because Tottenham fans get very upset if you suggest that, you know, Harry Kane might want to earn 3 times what he's earning and have more chance of winning trophies somewhere else. But I mean, I think that obviously the one that's most likely to leave this coming summer is Danny Rose, and he's not. You know, he wasn't starting last night. He's not an automatic choice at the moment. I think players like Kane and Dele Alli and Eric Dyer will be there for at least another season. So they do have this kind of limited window in all likelihood. But I think they're going to be okay for another season, maybe another season after that. Certainly, they'll want to. It will be an absurd decision to, no matter how much money is offered, to sell any of those big players before they actually get into the new stadium.
And just finally a word, I know you were at Wembley last night, Nick, but a word on Man City. Their 15-month unbeaten run at home is over. They were beaten by Basel last night, which on paper stands out as a fairly seismic result, and it was a pretty strong City team as well. And they were described as very poor by Pep Guardiola. I doubt he's really worried by what happened last night. I just wonder, does he feel that this is probably the best thing that could have happened to them? He has now real ammunition to go after them in training, to build them up ahead of their next game, show them how complacency and a lack of being dialed in mentally can affect you at this level. And for City and their chances of winning the treble, this maybe could have been the best thing that would have happened to them at this stage of the season, a defeat that will not hurt them in any way.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, the games that they've lost this season, the common thread, I suppose, maybe not the Liverpool game, but the common thread is games where their guard drops. They think they're just going to win easily. It's the group game in the Champions League, in the Champions League, and then last night, and then obviously Wigan in the FA Cup. These are sort of games where they thought they've got it in the bag. So this be perfect ammunition for Guardiola to kind of try and inspire them to guard against that complacency anyway.
Okay, Nick Miller, thanks so much for taking the time to chat to us this morning.
No problem. Thank you.
So Tottenham out, City through, albeit on the back of that defeat. It's interesting what he's saying about some of those Tottenham guys. He does think they'll all be there, apart from Danny Rose if he does leave. But I don't think that's a huge loss from a Tottenham fan's point of view. But that he does think, while the window for potential success is now starting to narrow, to close, that the likes of Kane, Ali, Eriksen, they'll all be there next year. I'm not 100% sure they will be.
Kane is the one I would think I'd be worried about if I was a Spurs fan. His ability to finish off chances and score goals, and I know from the Suarez situation at Liverpool, there's only so long you can keep saying no. Coutinho, in the big clubs like that. Well,
there were concrete bids coming through for Luis Suarez. We haven't actually seen or heard of specific bids being tabled for the likes of Harry Kane. But I'd be amazed if there wasn't something there this summer. He scored, 57 goals and 53 appearances for club and country in the last 12 months. Like, he's up there with the best in the world at the moment. Yeah, it's a phenomenal return, and he's definitely something's gonna happen. Maybe they're not, throwing bids in now because it'll, maybe create more of a barrier from Tottenham and from Daniel Levy. But you saw back with Gareth Bale a number of years ago, and they're kind of renowned for a hard stance. Daniel Levy is the chairman of Spurs. He won't want to leave them, man. But this is a kind of a crucial period now, and this Champions League thing could affect the mentality. They will be in Champions League next year, I think, but winning trophies, like Nick said there, someone like Harry Kane, if the big clubs keep coming knocking, if they eventually do put in those kind of offers, it'll be hard to. It's eventually he's going to want to make the move.
Loyalty only goes so far, and he has been loyal to him. And look, he's learned the ropes there, and he's improved, and even more so under Pochettino. So he'll want to be. I don't see it happening soon, but if he keeps scoring goals, you think 12, 14 months time, he's just they're not going to be able to resist.
If it's a big World Cup, it'll make it even more difficult to hold on to him. A lot of your comments are coming into us. Kieran Connolly says Spurs equals attractive, Juve equals Italian, no contest, the best team won. Well, it very much was a contest. It was a brilliant tie. So I think over the course of the 2 legs, we had, 7 goals, we had 3 penalties, one of them which was missed. There was an awful lot to get your teeth into. It was a really good contest, and I think Juventus, just their experience and their tactical nous, told in the end. Aidan Dundon, hard to stomach as a Spurs fan, I would imagine this morning is a tough watch, listen, read, whatever it is that you're doing this morning. Bottom line is Spurs showed inexperience. A more seasoned team would have shut up shop for the second half and closed out the game. There is something to that, but I'm just not sure that that's the way Spurs can play. Had they got a second goal and forced Juventus into having to score 3 to go through in the 90 minutes last night, well, then you would have applauded Spurs for continuing to play in the manner in which Pochettino had promised they would do in the build-up to the game. Mark Landry, this is an interesting one. PSG are the Mayo of the Champions League.
Oh, Lord.
He couldn't be more wrong. Like, Mayo bounced back from the biggest of setbacks. They're a team laden with warriors. They pushed arguably the greatest team of all time to the pin of their collar several times over the last few years. Astonishing work rate. And come back to get to the biggest game in the Irish sporting calendar on an almost annual basis. There is no comparison between PSG and the PSG I saw on Tuesday night and the Mayo football team.
I don't think so either. I think he's rambling there, isn't he, a little bit? I'd
imagine he's not a Mayo supporter with a comment like that, because that kind of a comment would really raise the hackles of Mayo fans.
Say maybe underachieving, that they haven't kind of got over the line, but there's a lot of
differences. They're definitely underachieving. There. PSG are Mayo underachieving? Look, yeah, the fact that they haven't won in All Ireland is an underachievement for this bunch of Mayo players. Let's not get into the whole where Mayo aren't playing.
We'll be here for a while if we start that.
There's a lot of your comments coming through on the rugby side of things as well. Billy Murphy says Ireland have been alarmingly leaking more tries than usual, with Scotland playing high tempo, attacking game matched with aggressive rucking. How do we live with this? That's something we're going to get stuck into in detail in a moment. It is something we need to worry about, because we've conceded 7 tries in 3 games, a lot of them from wide areas. That's something we'll chat to Quinny in a moment about. Niall Colgan, I always worry about Scotland, every 6 nations. I think the 2 teams and how they want to play are always quite similar. Strong at the ruck, quick ball imperative. We just do the basics better and clearer. Can't see beyond an Ireland win by 10 points. Plenty of optimism there. Kevin Donoghue, I'm a little worried about our game against the Scots. Our centres have to work as a pair. If we don't, we could let gaps open, which could open us for our weakness on the Stockdale wing. So we'll get into all of those with Quinny in a moment, but it is a very interesting one, where we are going exactly with the Scotland game and how difficult it is going to be to try and keep them out and stop them playing in the manner in which they did to beat England so convincingly. We're going to chat rugby in just a moment. Don't forget, OTBAM is brought to you this morning with Air, the home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content free with Air broadband. A little bit of Eddie O'Sullivan and Joe Malloy goodness before we get into the chat on Rugby with Quinny.
This is where the Fields of Athenry started. People think that's the Munster anthem.
Yeah.
But I remember, this is going back to 1997-98, just before the Heineken Cup, that after every game we'd lock the change room door and we sang the Fields of Athenry in the change room, and then the supporters would be outside, they'd hear it and they'd sing it as well, and that's where that started as an anthem.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And then it got picked up by Munster supporters, I think, a few years later. But the Fields of Athenry was the team song here.
Right, because the way it's sometimes are often told is maybe that Heineken Cup run of Munsters in 2000, and they lost to Northampton in the final that year. Maybe that's when it kind of really registered. But you guys sang it here in the dressing room.
Oh, obviously sing. It was after every game. If we won a game, you weren't going to be singing if you lost. But if we won a game, slam the change room door, and the Fields of Athenry was the song. And the supporters then were outside. I remember actually one game here was a big game. Was that season we played Lansdowne here. in Ballinasloe on a Saturday, and we beat them to get to play off against Cork-Cons in the semi-final. And I remember there was must have been 500 people singing the Fields of Athenry after on the pitch.
Wow.
Because I was up in the gantry with RTE and I was carefully doing an interview and this broke out. So they were really, really enjoyable times. I must say, I look back at it with great fondness.
So the lads on Off the Ball, our roadshow took us to Buccaneers last night. Eddie O'Sullivan and Joe Malloy were a key part of that. Gavin Duffy was there as well. So it's you Munster guys think that you own the Fields of Athenry, that everything originated in terms of that song with Munster. Well, Eddie O'Sullivan has just debunked that theory.
Eddie O'Sullivan has put us back in our box there, big time.
Look, there's enough of the Fields of Athenry to go around.
Absolutely.
You'll hear it at Anfield as well. You might hear it at Celtic Park.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there's no need to fight over this.
There's no doubt. We know it's come from Connacht anyway, and Eddie claims that they started it there in Buccaneers when he was coach there.
Did you play against them often?
I did, yeah.
Your AIL days?
Jimmy Screen, Martin Cahill, two big props running around the corner, one-out runners. It's a nightmare trying to tackle those
Tough
two guys.
To put down.
Two 20-stone mobile props. But yeah, they were very strong at that period there. And obviously, I played with Shannon, and you know, the time I went to Shannon, we won 4 All-Ireland leagues in the trot. So we'd a very strong team ourselves. But that Buccaneers side that he was involved in, and Steve McIver, there was other guys involved. They put a very good side together and were hard to beat.
Let's hope we're hard to beat on Saturday afternoon. 3 changes. Certainly all the papers and the online media are telling us there will be 3 changes when Joe Schmidt names his starting 15 for the Scotland game later today. All expected, really. Ian Henderson is going to come back into the second row, and it will be James Ryan that partners Ian Henderson and not Devon Toner, if the press are to be believed. Obviously, we do expect Tyke Furlong to start, so Andrew Porter will be steadying himself for an impact from the bench. And we needed a change in midfield because of that knee injury to Chris Farrell, so he's going to be replaced by Gary Ringrose. He comes in to play his first test since last year. Nothing unexpected from a changes point of view, and to be able to bring those 2 lines back into the team and replace Chris Farrell with Gary Ringrose, again, it just underlines the strength and depth that we have.
Massive, yeah. To have Henderson and Furlong back is huge for the team. They're outstanding players, and I think they would have got a fair bit of conditioning in the last couple of weeks as well. So I think a little bit of a rest. Every rugby player has some sort of niggle this time of year anyway. So they would have got good conditioning in, bit of fitness work, a little bit of a chance to refresh the mind. So it's great that they're back. They're massive players. I think Toner did outstandingly well against Wales. Obviously, Chris Farrell coming in for Robbie Henshaw was brilliant. He's gone now. Ringrose comes in. That's the one would concern you. You know, very little rugby played this year. He's only 3 or 4 involvements with Leinster, and it's a worry. You know, he's out about 8 weeks now since that ankle injury just after Christmas for Leinster, and before that shoulder surgery. So
we don't know. There isn't enough of a sample size from his point of view because he's still so young in terms of his career. Is he the type of player that can just come straight back into a team and play to a 7 or 8 out of 10? Some guys
Sexton,
can.
Sean O'Brien has done it over the years. Keane Healy has come back out of the cold.
It's a very tough position, though, isn't it?
Freakish kind of guys.
To be coming straight back in, that outside centre role.
Yeah, I think, though, he'll have had a lot of conditioning in the last number of weeks. And I'm not saying, you know, if you had a knee reconstruction, you're coming back. A lot of the body shuts down if you're out for 4, 5, 6 months. It's the other parts of the body and that shut down. He's out for 8 weeks. Has he been back in action for a couple of weeks? Probably doing conditioning, off-feet stuff, fitness in the pool, a lot of weight stuff.
Any contact?
He would have had to have done contact before he's played the game for Leinster the week before last. So he's probably back in contact 3, 4 weeks now. Doing a lot of running, probably doing a lot of conditioning sessions, bike sessions. So fitness-wise, I wouldn't be worried about him. And I saw shots of him yesterday, and
it's the sharpness, though, isn't it?
Yeah, he looks in great shape. He looks even a little bit stronger, more powerful. But yeah, that natural swerve and excitement and X factor that he has, will that be reduced a little bit? That's not what concerns me anyway, and I don't want to see that out of him. You need to, for Gary Ringrose on Saturday, he needs to do the basics well. You know, defend really strong, work a partnership with Bundyaki, run some good lines, make some good carries, because we can't expect him to go back and turn on absolute individual brilliance and win the game on his own. If he gets 60, 70 minutes on Saturday, it's a remarkable situation. So some guys can do it. We'll have to wait and see. I think from a fitness point of view and from an ability to push the body, I think he's young, he's fresh, he's strong. But it's that little bit of self-doubt. If any of that is there, it could affect him. Will Gregor Townsend attack him, go after him? Sure he will. He'll have Hugh Jones running at him anytime a Scotland forward can get in around Gary Ringrose. But it's very similar to what they'll try and do to Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton. And they did that in Scotland last year. So the only way Scotland win this game or come close to winning it is playing with high tempo, upsetting Ireland's breakdown, like our texter said a few minutes ago there. But
yeah, let's talk about the breakdown, because a key part of Ireland's win over Wales and Scotland's win over England was how they dominated the breakdown. And we need to ensure they don't have the same level of success in that area as they had against England. And Nigel Owens was in charge of the France-Ireland game. He was also in charge of the England-Scotland game. And after both games, the away side were not pleased with how the breakdown was officiated. It's Wayne Barnes this Saturday. So how much of a difference does that make?
Yeah, I think Nigel Owens was letting a lot of stuff go, and I admire the fact that he's letting a fair contest and he's letting guys go at it. And he's probably one of the ones, if I'm a back row playing with Nigel refereeing, I want him there because he let me have a cut at it. He let me go for the ball.
What does that mean? So it means having a cut at it, what does Nigel Owens allow you to do for maybe the likes of me who wouldn't be overly familiar with what goes on at the breakdown?
So a lot of the other referees, their first instinct is they shout, ruck forward, hands away, release, release, release. We hear a lot of that. So a guy gets in, he may get his hands on it. It could happen simultaneously very quickly as both sets of players are kind of going into the contact zone. He gets his hands in there, and the first thing they hear is release, release, hands away green, hands away red, whatever.
So he's talking to players. He's talking to players that are on the deck.
He's not saying anything. He's saying.
Okay, but when he says hands release away green, he's talking to a player who's on the ground. Clearly, if a guy's on his feet, he can be there for as long as he wants.
Yeah, but some of the referees, you see, they're trying to create that quick contest, and unless it's really obvious, they're shouting release, hands away, no hands, no hands. Nigel doesn't shout that, so it's better for the guy who's attacking that breakdown because he'll let you go after it, and he loves to see guys getting the hands on, and he's not afraid to give the penalty.
And don't we want to see a contest at the breakdown?
Yeah, we do, yeah, absolutely.
Instead of this almost rugby league style game where there's no...
We want to see a contest, and see, this is where it gets very complicated, is we want to see a contest, but we want to see a clear contest. We want to see other guys rolling away. We want to stop a bit of obstruction. And we saw a lot of bodies lying around Ireland's ball in Paris, and we had frustrations with that, the Irish, Joe Schmidt had. So it's a very, very fine kind of line in getting that right. It's very tricky. You have to have empathy for the referees because they have to make split decisions really quickly.
Generally, does Wayne Barnes... Does he police the tackler not rolling away area?
He's a little bit more stringent. And effectively, and I heard Eddie O'Sullivan talking about it a few weeks ago, it's really interesting. Some of the referees nearly coach players, hands away, roll away, back, hindmost foot, no contest, keep out of it. Whereas Nigel doesn't do that coaching unless it's really obvious. Of course he does. And we like that because, and he's a top referee, but I just think some of the contests, because so many players in so many teams, in every team now are going for the ball, where traditionally it was back rows before. Everyone in the team now, you have full backs trying to poach the ball. So it's an area that we need to get right at the weekend.
So does that mean we have to, like, how do we maintain possession of the ball in any way differently to what we would have done against Wales? Do we have to commit more guys to the ruck? Do we just need to keep continuing to do what we were doing? How does it change to ensure that the Scots don't have success in that area?
You need massive urgency. So that's a mental thing first and foremost, being aware of the threats. So Hamish Watson, brilliant. I think he's the best 7 in the tournament as regards attacking ball.
So whose job is it to clean him out?
Dan Levy has to track him. But anybody, initially it's Levy, but he can pop up anywhere. So if he's out in the wing and Keith Earls sees Hamish Watson, if Ringrose is tackled and Keith Earls has to come in off the wing and get Watson out of it, he's got to do that. So it doesn't really matter. Everybody's just to watch that and be really urgent. John Barkley, we know what he can do with the breakdown. His first reaction every time is to try and get his hands in there.
And he was pushing the envelope from the very start against England.
Yeah.
It's within his right to see how far he can push the referee.
And he does give away penalties at times, and we see that. And yeah, of course you've got to push it. Listen, I gave away plenty of penalties in my day.
But you also got away with plenty as well.
Yeah, and you walk away from some of them going, like, that was my penalty, and then you walk away from others saying, yeah, I got away with that one and I should have been penalised. So it's a fine line. And that's what you want your back rows. Wilson is very competitive as well. So their back row are going to be, going after our breakdown. So it's not just our back row who have to match them. But another thing for Ireland is staying on our feet a little bit longer and being really, really aggressive in our carries. And there's an onus on the player who makes the carry to really present that ball back there. But interestingly, against Wales, we got over, even off slow ball, we got over the gain line in those kind of combat zones, if you like, where Wales had a lot of players in front of us. We're running into a bit of a brick wall, a little bit of footwork, and you kind of work your way through a gap. and then it's easier to present the ball.
We did that very well against the Welsh, didn't we?
Our presentation was much better. So Murray's coming on and he can sweep the ball away. Whereas France kind of stopped us in the gain line. They scragged us. They kind of choke tackled us. It fell on the ground. There was a ball of players there. A real fight to get the ball back. That doesn't suit us. So Scotland will try and do that. So, you know, back row battle nowadays, and any of these big games, it's a really key area. It's right up there with scrum, line out, and the breakdown battle.
So that's Ireland with the ball and how we maintain the ball and ensure quick enough ball to be able to create try-scoring opportunities. What about us without the ball? 7 tries conceded in 3 games, a number of those in the wide channels, particularly the 3 against the Italians and the Welsh would be of most concern, I would have thought. And so much of the commentary around the build-up to this game has surrounded how poor we've been in defensively. After the Wales game, Andy Farrell was described as world-class by Joe Schmidt. He said he's no doubts about the system. The players just aren't doing what was being expected of them when it came to their defensive duties. They've had 2 weeks to get it right. Is that enough? Particularly the way Scots are they're undoubtedly going to attack us in that
Well, they've got to improve. They're not going to get it to 100%, and any defensive systems are always vulnerable with good attack. So Scotland have a very, very good attack. So it is a concern, a worry. The wider channels. I wrote a piece for the Indo last Saturday on this defensive issue, trying to explain it to the public, really, my opinions on it. Unfortunately, there was no papers last Saturday, but it was online and it's still there. I think it's more of, I'm of the opinion that it's the players not making correct decisions together, not seeing what's in front of them. We're getting quite compressed off phase play, and then teams are kind of putting some back passes out the back door and getting that bit of width in us. And then we look a bit vulnerable, and then you kind of a little bit of panic situation where our wingers are not making correct decisions. And so I think we need to get our spacings right. It's something they will have really focused on the last 2 weeks. Now with the snow last week, they wouldn't have had a lot of training. But sometimes this is actually better, watching videos, highlighting positions people should be in, walking through it. So we need to get a little bit more stretch in our defensive line, because we've plenty of numbers there, but we're actually quite compressed. And one pass has taken out 3-4 players. And that's about identification, looking up and seeing who's standing between 9 and 10. Are Scotland keeping a couple of forwards there? If they are, we've got to be compressed. If they're not, you've got to push a little bit wider. You've got to be aware of the threat of the scrum half. But it's something that Andy Farrell will be really frustrated about. I think he's a world-class coach, defensive coach, and it's frustrating. Now, there's been a bit of chopping and changing in the centre positions. And when I played, you know, Dricko, Darcy, they were kind of your defensive captains. They did a lot of the marshalling, the talking. You have wingers who are very vocal. Maybe our wingers are a little bit quieter. So I think a lot of focus and emphasis in the last 2 weeks would be more communication, being louder, nominate who you have and get your spacing right. It sounds very easy to fix. Yeah. It's
not. Is there a lot of trust in that as well?
There is, yeah.
Like, for example, if you're coming in from the wing, you doubt whether the guy inside you is going to get his man. So you leave your man to go in and make that tackle, and then suddenly it's
You've got to get it right, yeah. And the danger with really aggressive line speed from the inside is if we want everyone really tight to rush up really hard. If these couple of decoy runners here and the passes go out the back and they get a shift to a wider position, then you're kind of out of the game.
Yeah.
So it's identification sometimes to say, well, let's not go as hard.
Don't commit.
And we push towards the touchline a little bit and we'll stay connected. And what we're not doing out in those wider channels is staying connected. We're kind of coming up, coming in. Bundyaki came really hard at one stage. Stockdale was back, you know, a little bit deeper than him. So it's just getting the timing of those things right and maybe getting a little bit more of a stretch. And I think sometimes you don't want to go as hard, particularly off phase play when there's a wide. Obviously, if the ruck is slow and it's on the touchline, straight away there's no kind of deviation away from the fact that you want to get off the line really aggressively and quickly. But sometimes in the middle of the field, when there's a possibility going both sides, we're still rushing up quite hard. So I believe, you know, when you really focus and break the thing down and look at it, but this has cropped up a few times, and it goes back to the World Cup in 2015. So 2 different defensive coaches and similar things are happening where we're a little bit tight. So that tells me it's players' decisions. And I know from being out in that environment, when you're sucking seagulls, you're under massive pressure, you're fatigued, it's harder for me to chat to you and run, say, Dave, who you got, stay connected my inside. But that's the level you've got to be to be a brilliant defensive side. So
say it's even more difficult when there's different personnel coming into the back line every week.
The players are working incredibly hard. So it's not as if guys are limbering back and they're kind of lazy and they're not getting off the line. They're working incredibly hard. And that's probably the frustrating point. If you get broke down with brilliant attack, you just got to go round of applause and say, well done. But we're making it a little bit easier than it should be. And if we don't get it right on Saturday, that's exactly what Scotland will do. They've picked Blair Kinghorn, and Seymour is out. So Blair Kinghorn is 21. He's 6'5". They've picked him because of our kicking game, and Gregor Townsend has come out and said that. You know, he could have put Lee Jones in there, more of a elusive winger. Seymour's a loss for him now from attacking point of view, but Kinghorn's a full back. So to put a 6'5" winger in there to counteract that box kick and Sexton's crossfield kicks and stuff like that. So that was an interesting one.
Okay, well, we're going to get the Scottish perspective now, because Scottish rugby legend Gavin Hastings, he popped into studio for a chat with Nathan ahead of this weekend's game. He was over with Guinness, who've partnered with Paddy Cullen, who'll change its name actually to a rugby favourite, and the Scottish rugby anthem Flower of Scotland on match day is a special nod to the Scottish supporters, creating a new home from home destination for a pre-match pint for all fans, whatever their jersey. This is the chat between Gavin and Nathan.
All right, I'm delighted to say we're joined in the studio by a bona fide Scottish legend, a Grand Slam winner, British and Irish Lions legend as well, Gavin Hastings. Thanks a lot for joining us in the studio.
Lovely to be here.
What are you here promoting?
Well, obviously, I think that special affinity between Scots and Irish rugby fans, and obviously, any game between the two Celtic sets of supporters, it's always guaranteed to be a great occasion, and lots of bonhomie around the rugby match.
Yeah.
And
the big Guinness sign is a giveaway.
Well, you mentioned it. I just drink it.
What you hear then is that Paddy Cullen's in Ballsbridge, they're basically turning it Scottish, which I think is a very nice gesture.
Well, very much so.
In fact, it's almost overly welcoming.
It's going to be called the Flower of Scotland pub, isn't it, for the weekend? So that's fantastic, and I'm sure hundreds of Scottish fans will venture into the bars of Dublin pre-match and obviously post-match as well. But, like I say, I think there is a special relationship between both sets of supporters, and I've always had some wonderful times here in Dublin.
Well, you always won.
Back in the day, I tell you what, we've been paying for it ever since. But sure, there's a bit more optimism coming into Saturday's game than there's been probably for a number of years.
That friendliness between the two sets of supporters, was it a very different atmosphere on the pitch when you were playing Ireland, say, compared to when you were playing England?
You could say that, but look, you always have a will to win, I think, and a desire to win, and it was no different back in the years that I played as it is now. I think the one thing that I'd say, obviously, with the Pro 14 is that the players know each other very, very well. I mean, I played 10 years of international rugby, and it was probably only after your fourth or fifth year, because you only saw the guys and played against them once a year. So you needed to play against them 3 or 4 times before you felt that you were becoming friends. But of course, nowadays it's great. You have no pressure. You come along and you do have a couple of pints before the game, and it's great because there's no pressure on you.
Yeah, the whole England thing then, and the rivalry, it really did blow up over the last couple of weeks with what happened with Eddie Jones, and you found yourself right in the centre of it. If anyone missed it, and I don't think they did, your comments before the game, I was just again reading them back earlier, where you did say you admired Eddie Jones for what he had achieved, but as a supporter of one of his opponents, you just want to rub his face in the dirt.
Well,
now, you didn't, I'm assuming you didn't mean that literally.
No, of course not. And, it was just, it's not really something that I want to talk about. I think Eddie Jones handled it very, very well. And it was an unfortunate incident. But I guess you get that if you're in the public eye. But, let's move on from there. I think it's important to go on from there and concentrate on the good things that happened in the rugby field, which of course 2 weeks ago was a wonderful day for Scottish rugby.
Well, that's the thing. It was such an incredible victory. The one thing I did wonder was, because you obviously now are going to games, looking at it differently, and maybe the way people look at rugby figures and public figures is very different to how it was 20, 25 years ago, that they feel if Eddie Jones is on a train, it's like he's public property. People can say whatever they want. And you're going to games now watching your son play for Glasgow, and I wonder if you've noticed that maybe people in the crowd's attitude is different going to a game, that they feel they can say more, they can be more critical.
I don't know, it's a very good point, and you know, I think social media brings its own challenges as well, and clearly when you know, everything, there's no hiding place now, and when people are out celebrating, you know, sets of players after the game, then you just never know, and so I think the players have to be, and indeed people in my position, you have to be more sensitive to that, and you know, occasionally things happen, and you have no control over them, and you know, that's the way it is, but obviously, you know, we move on and we look forward to Saturday's game.
Yeah, I'd imagine everyone in Scotland is in pretty good humour right now. Back-to-back wins over England, France, particularly over the last 15, 20 years, don't come around too often.
No, you're right, and I think it's always a curious thing when you do, you know, you've got 3 away matches, and yet in the second and third weekends you have your two home matches, and then obviously Scotland are finishing off with a game here in Dublin, and then looking forward to Rome next week. So, you know, certainly from where we were sort of just under 4 weeks ago after the Welsh game to it's amazing, you know, that Scotland have turned around what was a massive disappointment in Cardiff to being in a pretty optimistic mood coming into Saturday's match, and you know, that's all down to their play and the fact that they put 2 pretty decent sides to the sword at Murrayfield, and we just have to improve our away form now, don't we?
Yeah, it's been some very difficult years for Scottish rugby. Haven't won a championship since it became the Six Nations at the turn of the century, over a quarter of a century since the last Grand Slam. Is this as confident, as optimistic you've been about Scottish rugby in the interim? I
think there's no doubt that this is the best Scottish team we've had for an awful long time, and the fact that we do have some genuinely classy players in the team, and particularly in the backs, I think you know, Greg Laidlaw's come in and he's really been a foundation stone for Scotland, and John Barclay has had, you know, some superb games of late, and he's just matured into a very robust and all-round competent player and a very good captain. And you know, you have the sort of slightly mercurial talents of Finn Russell there at 10, and you know, quite a contrast to Johnny Sexton, I think, at standoff, and it'll be a fascinating battle. And clearly, you know, the battle of you know, Ford and Finn Russell a fortnight ago, and obviously with Owen Farrell there as well. It was a very interesting challenge, and the same applies, I think, for Saturday. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I think Stuart Hogg can be the match winner if Scotland are going to win on Saturday, and I think we
As
really
he was last year.
Well, he was indeed, and you know, that in itself was terrific, and Finn Russell very much at the heart of a lot of the good stuff as well. So, you know, we're not going to catch Ireland. No one's going to say, well, probably caught them a bit cold last year at the start of the Six Nations, but you know, they'll be certainly ready for anything, I'm sure, that Scotland throw at them. But equally, I'm glad that we've had a week off from the England game and been able to sort of recharge the batteries and focus in on the specific talents that Ireland are going to pose.
You mentioned Finn Russell there, and so much of what was good about Scotland came through Finn Russell against England. At the same time, the opening day against Wales, he got huge criticism after it for his performance. You mentioned the word mercurial. When you think back to, say, when his head coach now, Gregor Townsend, made the breakthrough, would you see any similarities between the two of them?
I'd see lots of them, actually. And, you know, I think good players, you know, respond to you know, a bit of criticism. I think Finn Russell, he plays rugby with a smile on his face, and it's wonderful to see. And you know, you look at Johnny Sexton, and it looks as though, you know, it's all very, very serious for Sexton. And you know, he's a wonderful rugby player, and the way that Ireland have played their rugby and become, very competent in everything that they do, and the confidence that they have. And you look back to their victory in Paris when they had the 41 phases of possession, and he had the confidence and the ability to strike that beautiful goal from 10 yards inside the French half. And just for that Irish team to go through these phases just shows that they are very, very competent in what they do, whereas I don't think Scotland will be capable of going through that many phases, and they need to probably try something after 10 or 12 phases. So, that's going to be an interesting contrast in styles between, Joe Schmidt being pretty, fundamental in getting the basics right, and Gregor playing rugby with a bit more laissez-faire attitude, I would suggest.
Do you sense then that maybe with Finn Russell that we're going to see over the next 2-3 years that he, and maybe going to wrestling, this isn't going to be the case, that he becomes more Johnny Sexton-esque, that he loses part of that game, that he becomes a little bit more reliable?
I hope not. And genuinely I say that because rugby still has that ability for people of different takes on the way that the game is played. And Finn, it's like, I love seeing sports men and women playing with smiles on their faces, and because if you give the impression that you're enjoying yourself, invariably you do. And I think Finn's a breath of fresh air to rugby, and to be able to play with a smile on your face in the hotbed of international rugby is not an easy thing to do. And yet when things go right, as they did against England, then it's even more joyful to watch. So, I'm not going to criticise him because that's just the way that he is. And that's not to criticise Johnny Sexton as well, because he's developed into a tremendously competitive player. And he's a winner, Johnny Sexton. He always has been. He always will be. He's out of the Owen Farrell mould. And, that's the way that he plays. And clearly it suits Irish rugby to have a guy like Johnny Sexton in that position at standoff, and he really is the controller for everything that is good about the Irish team. But there's no doubt that Finn Russell, by contrast, he can make things happen from a Scottish perspective, and that's where there's an interesting contrast to the styles that they play.
Do you almost then just go with Finn Russell heading towards the 2019 World Cup, and you work with him on the understanding that he's going to gain experience, so that there'll be more of the type of performance you get against England. He'll be able to pick and choose his moments, and that he learns the lesson that really in test match rugby you're certainly not going to get away with what you get away with in Pro 14, and even probably November internationals.
No, I appreciate that, and yet he played against the second best team in the world a fortnight ago and was outstanding, and he saw the gaps. And I do maintain that he's one of the best passers of a rugby ball, particularly left to right. And he's got wonderful control with his passing, and he can really zip the ball, as he showed last year in passing to Stuart Hogg, and Hoggy scoring his tries. So I think he has a lot of talent. I mean, if he can take anything out of Johnny's book, it is his quality of kicking out of hand with Sexton's, who I think has become a very accomplished kicker out of hand and putting the ball into space. And I think if there was one criticism that I'd level against Finn Russell, it would be if he can just keep working from his kicking out of hand, then he will become a very accomplished player. But you don't become that player overnight, and you have to learn, and game by game and Six Nations year on Six Nations year, you do become hardened to the rigours of full-blooded test match rugby.
Does he learn more then from the defeat against Wales to the win against England?
Unquestionably, he learns more about the defeat, and he realises that things are not going to work all the time, but you've got to choose. But there was something about that Wales defence, and Wales were no slouches in that game, and they've had two very close games in the meantime, and who knows what would have happened if the game against Ireland had gone on another 10 minutes a fortnight ago. So I don't think Wales are there are no slouches in the game of international rugby, and no one really gives them a hiding. And they might not win all their games, but they can be competitive right up to the last 5 or 10 minutes. And that's where I want Scotland to be, particularly in their away matches. If they can be in that game, then you've got to learn from that. You don't want to be out of touch at half time, like almost we were in Cardiff. So, we held in against France, and we came good in the last 20 minutes. We obviously got off to a good lead against England and managed to maintain that and probably even move somewhat ahead and frustrated England. And, if we can be somewhat frustrating against Ireland, then we're going to have a chance, unquestionably, heading into the last 15 minutes or so, still in with a chance of victory.
Yeah, it's going to be such an interesting dynamic in the way that you'd assume Ireland are going to try and slow the ball down at times. And Ireland, particularly conceding 3 tries in back-to-back Six Nations games and still managing to win both of them is rather unusual. That's where Ireland's weakness is. That's where Scotland have been just sensational at times. The temptation must be to go for Scotland as if it is a home game, to really attack Ireland in those areas.
Well, I think Scotland will certainly try and do that. From an Irish perspective, I think they'll unquestionably try and dominate up front. And my worry is that they perhaps go out and do that. I mean, I was at Scotstoun watching Glasgow versus Leinster in the Champions Cup a few weeks ago, and Leinster just dominated from start to finish. Sexton had a magnificent game, and he just controlled the areas in which Ireland played in, and then they just had this driving line-out maul that was unstoppable. So that's my one worry, that if Ireland really get in a roll and force Scotland in the back foot and create this pressure in the Scotland's 22, that they could just steamroller Scotland, and then they do get 2 or 3 tries there, and I think if Ireland were to get 20 points up, then they're just going to coast away from Scotland the way that Wales did.
Yeah, whatever about this weekend, hopes must be high heading into a World Cup in 2019 under Gregor Townsend, what he's already done with Glasgow, but the way that they're coming to an end of a transition period, it seems very quickly with Scotland, that they're 18 months out from a World Cup. They're in a pretty good position.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how things develop, and obviously Ireland in the same pool as Scotland and also the host Japan, and I think that in itself is going to create a huge amount of excitement, not only amongst the Scottish and Irish fans, but also the Japanese fans as well, and the fact that we will have, sellouts in those games. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've got to go on to the next level whereby we can be competitive away from home. Obviously, the last 2 away games, against England and against Wales, we got absolutely mullered. And I'd like to think that we learnt from last year's defeat at Twickenham and put that to good use a fortnight ago against England. And what we have to do going into Saturday is learn from the most recent away defeat, which obviously was in Cardiff a few weeks ago. So, I have a feeling that Scotland will be a lot more robust than they were down in Cardiff, and will be more prepared to take on the unique challenges that Ireland pose. For Gregor, I hope he has 1 or 2 things up his sleeve, and but Joe Schmidt is a very, very competent coach, and probably the best coach in world rugby, and he's really got Ireland playing to a tremendous formula that makes it very difficult for teams to play against and for teams to win.
I mentioned your son Adam earlier on. He's still, 21?
21, aye.
One of Finn Russell's backups at Glasgow as an out half. Finn Russell's going to Racing, so he should get an opportunity. Pro 14 Champions Cup. Are you thinking already of you the flights booked to Japan next year?
Well, I've been at every World Cup since the start, so I see no reason not to go. But look, there's a lot of young talent coming through, and I think Scotland has its fair share of young talent. The trouble is that we've only got 2 outlets for that in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and Ireland clearly have got your 4 provincial sides. So I think that's the challenge, that is to give all these young up-and-coming players enough game time, and but we'll see how things progress, and I don't really know.
Do you give him a critical analysis after every game?
I ask him if he's enjoyed himself. It's the most important thing for anyone. I think if you're playing sport to a pretty high level, you've got to have fun doing it. Take a leaf out of Finn Russell's book and play with a smile on your face, and just enjoy what you're doing. And I know the enjoyment comes from winning, but professional sport being what it is, you can't win necessarily every game, but have a smile on your face. I think that's a pretty good message, isn't it?
Had you a smile on your face when you left Augusta recently? I don't think anyone's ever played Augusta and not left with a smile on their face.
Yeah, I would suggest that was pretty good as well. I'm lucky. I get some opportunities that through having had the opportunity to, I guess, to meet a lot of people around the world, then that's what it's all about.
That's a nice perk. What you shoot?
83 or 4.
Here you take it.
I'll take it.
How were the greens rolling?
They were rolling pretty good.
Oof.
I saw Rory there. He's in good form.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I've got my money on Rory.
Well,
come on, Rory.
Very good. Interesting. A little bit of insight there. Gavin, you've been very good with your time. Thanks a lot for coming in. I know you have a busy afternoon. Gavin Hastings has been with us with thanks to Guinness. They're turning Paddy Cullen's in Ballsbridge into the flower of Scotland. They're going to welcome Scottish fans and the Irish supporters as well ahead of the game on Saturday.
Yeah, great stuff there from Nathan and from Gavin Hastings. Let's hope Gavin isn't in as good a form come about 4 o'clock, 4:30 Saturday evening, that Ireland have sent the Scots packing and the Grand Slam is still on. That's pretty much all myself and Quinny have for you on this morning's OTB AM. We had these 2 tickets. They're taken from my desk, but I know Tommy has them in there. They're safe and sound. Here they are. 2 tickets. A lot of you wanted them, but only one person is going to get them. Congratulations to Kevin Kane, who has won these 2 tickets to the Ireland-Scotland game. It's on Saturday with thanks to Vodafone Rugby. Later on today and Off the Ball, an awful lot to come between now and 10 o'clock this evening. Don't miss this, because there's a brilliant Keith Andrews show later today. He's going to be joined in studio by AP McCoy. They're going to be talking about AP's career, Arsenal, his Cheltenham tips, what a week it is ahead for all racing fans. Kevin Caban's going to be in as well in studio to chat Champions League with Keith. That's going to be live on YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. It's 12:30. Subscribe and turn on your notifications so you know exactly when we're bringing you some of this good stuff. Tonight and Off the Ball there will be Thursday night rugby. One night later as we edge towards that Scottish game, John Giles as well and Shawnee Maguire also on the show. And then tomorrow morning in OTB AM, Keith is going to be in this seat with Kenny Cunningham, rugby with James Downey and Eddie O'Sullivan from New York City, of all places. And then I'm back with you Monday morning, where we'll be hopefully looking back on an Irish win. We'll bring you plenty of football and GAA as well. So have a good day. We'll chat to you tomorrow.
OTB AM. In association with Air. Get Air Sport free with Air Broadband.